Here in 20.1, the textbook explains the historical context, which is always so important to read carefully because the rest of the chapter is going to be growing out of this, developing this, fleshing it out. And so notice right away in their title for this section, they say humanism and the Italian Renaissance. Basically, they're implying that humanism is the Italian Renaissance. It's the defining concept. The Renaissance wouldn't have happened without humanism. So that is one of your most important concepts in this chapter, to be able to define, understand, and apply to artworks. So they are going to explain humanism, but they're not going to do it in this first paragraph. You'll have to wait until they come down to this paragraph. So let's backtrack for a moment. What they do first is to give you a geographic rundown of the major centers of art. So Florence, the big one, as well as Milan and Venice, also very important. And then they talk about some of the key courts where dukes are important patrons, Mantua, Ferrara, and Urbino. They also give you a rundown of some of the big names in Italian history, culture, politics, art. They say political power and artistic patronage were dominated by wealthy families. The Medici in Florence, perhaps the most important patrons in Italy at this time period. We'll see that they are incredibly wealthy. They have more money than God. They have more money than Jeff Bezos. They're so wealthy that they're actually going to lend the money to Isabella and Ferdinand for the costs, the expenses of those ships that go traveling to find so-called America. So if you're lending money to kings and queens, you know you've got plenty. They're bankers, but they also started out as cloth merchants like Arnolfini. And we're going to see that eventually they become dukes and they have big political ambitions. So the Medici is a name you must know. We'll also see the Montefeltro in Urbino, the Gonzaga in Mantua, and then the Visconti and Sforza families, very important dukes in Milan, the Este family, dukes in Ferrara. So they're telling you that we're dealing once again with cities that have money, and in the case of Florence and Venice, some degree of independence. And this is a continuation of the historical process you saw when we studied Siena and Florence in the 14th century, as the cities grew, in our video about the growth of life in the cities. And so once again, commerce, money, is the big deal. That's not surprising. We already learned that commercial growth was expanding the class spectrum, and wealthy merchants who made their money in commerce could gain status and have increasing power. Interestingly, money was also tied to military might, because Italy at this time was completely tossed by violence, tremendous factionalism, constant battles, dukes seeking to overtake cities, dukes rivaling other dukes and trying to overthrow them. And what this meant was that among the constant battling, there was a system of mercenary armies. So you have armies for hire, and they're led by a commander who is called a condottieri, a professional military man who keeps an army and basically rents it out as needed when you have your invasion or your battle. And so condottieri themselves gain fame, and then we're going to see that dukes are also making their money partly as being condottieri for other dukes. And all of this is related to patronage of the arts as an important public activity with political overtones. What we already started to see with Lorenzetti, we're going to see the growth of that mindset, and they have this very important quote here. A Florentine merchant, Giovanni Rucellai, saying, why support the arts? Why invest money? Well, you're serving the glory of God, the honor of the city, and you're commemorating yourself. What can be better than that? And down here is where they start to orient you toward humanism. And I think they kind of do it in a little bit of a roundabout way. They start talking about the term Renaissance. And what they're trying to say is that we even use the word Renaissance for this time period because of humanists, because of people who were known as Italian humanists, who were reviving a tremendous interest in the civilization of Rome and Greece before it as the foundations of their civilization. And we're no longer looking exclusively to the Bible for their ideas and their sense of values and meaning. And so this is a kind of a growth in the idea that, as they say here, going back to the writer Petrarch and other 14th century writers, the power and potential of human beings for great individual accomplishment becomes a focus. We saw in the Middle Ages a focus overwhelmingly on God and the religious system, the religious experience. Now, there is, if you come down here, a look to the accomplishments of the classical past, the classical world of Greece and Rome, for both inspiration and instruction. Meaning, if you were a Medici young man, now you would be taught, you would be educated, learning to read Plato and Aristotle, not just the Bible. So look at this painting. It is perhaps the most brilliant demonstration of humanism from the Renaissance. This painting is actually going to be made in the 1500s. It's a little later, and it's one of the most brilliant paintings of the Renaissance. But I'm showing it to you for you to see what humanism is all about. You have at the center Plato and Aristotle, right in the middle of architecture that is clearly Roman and Greek classical architecture. You have the Greco-Roman deities Athena, or Minerva, known by the name Minerva to the Romans, and Apollo, the Greek and Roman god of light and learning and poetry and the arts. So there's no Jesus in sight here, no Mary. These are actually the pagan philosophers. We'll see that we have mathematicians from the Greco-Roman past. We have Pythagoras making algebraic equations. And then we have Diogenes here, one of the Greco-Roman philosophers. We have everyone assembled in togas celebrating the life of the mind and human accomplishment, rather than the divinity of God. This is hugely significant and different. These are the kind of writers that a Medici family member, the wealthy sons of the Medici, would have been reading about, learning about, studying. They would have been studying the Greek and Roman myths. And they're going to commission art that is based on that tradition.